Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to Light and Darkness Today. Chapter 31, Time. What to do? Alva thought. What can we do? Before Prince Matarin, Alva's calm, defiant demeanor never changed. But in his heart he knew the prince was right. The war was lost. While Hope himself and the others had been able to prevent a massacre for at least one more day, Matarin had achieved his purpose. The opening of the pass had been breached. Enemy forces were streaming in on the right and left. The Lassanian army was completely surrounded. And Matarin could bring in a force of 20 or even 50 times their size to grind them to powder. There was no chance of retreat, and even if Hope had enough strength left to help the men resist the power of the Dachmanim, they were hopelessly outnumbered. These were the bare facts. He saw to some defenses and then walked back to check on Hope. Hope was exhausted. Alva put his arm around her shoulder to support her as they walked back to the camp. He took her toward her tent, knowing that at this time she was far too tired to do anything but sleep as much as possible before the next engagement. They walked in silence for a few minutes with Nira beside them. Alva's mind was flooded with thoughts of what he might have done differently. Was there any way to avoid this? Was it inevitable? Had victory ever really been possible? If not, was he right in thinking that they must fight anyway? It all sounded so much more compelling before they were at the point of losing. In his mind, he had always believed that somehow they might prevail. But was that always nonsense? Had he brought these men to their deaths unnecessarily? He knew the men would need to see him in a different spirit than this, so he tried to shake these thoughts off, but they continued to nag him. "We failed, haven't we?" Hope suddenly asked weakly, as though she were reading his thoughts. "I don't know," Alva said. "We did our best, so I don't know if it's fair to call it a failure. But we lost." To the men, I'll say something like, "It's not over as long as we're breathing." But it's pretty much over. "Maybe it would have been better if I had died before we reached Lassa Creston," Hope said. "If the Dachmanim were going to conquer us anyway, at least less men would have died." "No," Alva said. "Life under Dachman would just extend death. Because of you, more men will have died free rather than living as slaves. They will have died as Lassanians. My father used to say doing the right thing does not always yield the right result, but we must do it anyway, because it is the right thing." "We did the right thing, Hope." "I'll try to believe that." "Me too." Nira said nothing. For the first time since Alva had met her, there were tears in her eyes. The three walked the rest of the way to Hope's tent in silence. Just as they reached it, Hellel met them. It was clear that he had something on his mind. They looked at him inquisitively. After a moment, he said, "Alva, Hope, it's time." It took a few moments for his words to register. Finally, Hope asked, "Time? Now?" "Yes." At that moment, Hope's fatigue seemed to melt. Her countenance radiated, and a new flood of unspeakable joy filled the tired, broken camp. Alva's face assumed a baffled smile as Hope drifted into a state of confused euphoria. "You had better get ready," Hellel said. Technically, you should not have seen each other already today, but that can't be helped. Hopefully it won't bring us any bad luck, Alva said. They all laughed. Now, I have a lot of preparations to make, Hellel said. Nira, bring Hope to the center of the camp in 2 hours. Alva, don't get lost. I won't, Alva said. Nira took Hope into her tent as Alva and Hellel went their separate ways to make preparations. It was a lot to do to organize a wedding in 2 hours. Luckily, Hellel had thought through the necessary preparations well in advance. When he informed Phylon, he asked if, as king, he would like to perform the ceremony. I would prefer not to, Phylon said. That is usually the work of civil servants, and I would rather do things in the Lassenian way. Of course, I don't know who we have in the camp that fits that bill. I know just the man, Hellel said with a smile. Ah, yes, Phylon said. Perfect. How fortunate that he arrived just in time, Hellel said. It was after sundown when Alva walked to the center of the camp where the wedding ceremony would be performed. Bonson was on his right and Prior on his left. They were the men who would stand with him. They wore the blue and white uniform of the Danae household. Pensor was to occupy the seat of honor that would have been given to his father had he been there. Arrangements were simple. A large guard had not been left around the perimeter, but only watchmen who could call the others to arms should the Dochmonians choose to attack. Most of the camp was gathered in a great circle around the center. As the circle opened for Alva and his companions to enter, Alva could see that Balsasanar stood beaming on a stage that had been erected in the center. Alva smiled, realizing that his round friend would perform his wedding. Alva walked up the steps onto the stage. Bonson took his place at his right, with Prior on Bonson's right. The 3 heads looked like stairs, with Bonson a head taller than Alva and Prior a head taller than him. Before long, a trumpet was blown announcing Hope's appearance. She wore a simple white gown which reached her feet, the sleeves of which reached her wrists. Her face was glowing pinkly, with the blush of a beautiful young bride at the center of attention. Nira was with her, of course, and with them was Salia, who Hope had asked to stand with her as well. Hellel met her, and in place of her father led her to the stage, with her 2 bridesmaids following behind. When they reached the steps, Balsasanar spoke in his loud, drawn-out squeak. By whose authority will this woman be given to this man? Mine, Hellel said. Then he took his seat of honor opposite Pensor as the ladies made way onto the stage. Hope stood opposite Alva, with Bonson opposite Nira and Prior opposite Salia. As Hope and Alva gazed at one another, with love in their eyes, Bonson looked at Hope and examined his own feelings. Hope was beautiful. She was radiant. Yes, he loved her, but not as he used to. He realized that he felt no envy. He felt nothing but happiness for Alva and Hope. That happiness meant freedom. Then he looked at Salia, who smiled at him. In his quest to live for the hope of others, he had found his own hope. His chest swelled with joy and pride as he turned toward Balsasanar, who was just beginning to speak. Hellel had noticed Bonson's expression and thought how he wished King Tyagon were here, so he could tell him that Bonson was now a full-fledged butterfly. With a smile, he too turned his attention to the mayor of Bracia. Anyone who knows me, Balsasanar began, knows that I like the sound of my own voice, but I'll try to keep my comments short." The entire crowd laughed, not so much at his joke as at his comical appearance and the hilarious sound of his voice as he spoke in his high-pitched tone. He paused for several seconds, then with a solemn expression he pointed his large, fat finger above the crowd's heads to where some of the enemy would be standing in the darkness. "They think." This was followed by another long pause. "That they outnumber us, and because they have more men, they can extinguish the light. What they don't understand is that the light can never be extinguished. Even if they destroy all of us, it will live on, just as the sun, moon, and stars will continue to shine. When any man in any land helps his neighbor, protects the weak, or treats a poor man or a stranger as his brother, when men are faithful to their wives, when wives are true to their husbands, when parents are patient and gentle with their children, the light lives on." As the mayor spoke, his own face seemed to shine, though it may have been the reflection of hope so near him. No one was laughing now. Everyone was silent, waiting for the next word. "Today, we celebrate the marriage of the crown jewels of our kingdom, Alva Danae and Lady Hope the Luminary. Now, I'm not so pessimistic as to think that our victory is lost. Surrounded and outnumbered though we may be, I believe we will live on and conquer. So I'm going to be so bold as to give some words of wisdom to the young lovers before us. Marriage is the foundation of Lacinian society, perhaps the clearest manifestation of light when it is shining as it should. Lady Hope, I know it is hard to imagine that life with Alva Danae, mighty warrior and gracious friend, will not always be perfect. It will not. Alva, I know it is hard to imagine that you could ever have a conflict with such a gentle and sweet young bride. You will. When that happens, remember where you began. Remember the love you had at the first, and love one another still. Be patient. Be kind. I dare to believe even now that you will have children who will grow up thriving in the light kingdom. Love them. Be patient and kind with them. As wonderful as you both are, they will not be just like you. Let them be who they are, and at the same time teach them to live in the light. Teach them to support the weak, to share with the poor, to help the suffering, to welcome the weary stranger. Lady Hope, the light that makes your countenance shine like the sun is wonderful, but even it pales in comparison with the deeper and stronger light of truth, justice, integrity, compassion, and love. For every man listening, be you Lacinian or Huron, let me say a word. Perhaps when you left, everything in your family was not as it should have been. perhaps you had not been the husbands and fathers you should have been. There may be some wasted years in the past, but it is not too late. I refuse to believe we will be defeated. When you return home, begin anew. Love your wives and your children. Live as men of the light, and the light will shine on in the darkness, and the darkness will never overcome it. Then turning to Hope, he asked, Hope, will you have this man? I will. Then turning to Alva, he asked, Alva, will you have this woman? I will. Then by the trust given to me as mayor of the great city of Racia, under the authority of His Majesty, Philon IV, I now pronounce you man and wife. Lord Danae, you may kiss your bride. Alva kissed Hope for the first time as her glow radiated. Then they both turned to face the crowd before the front of the stage. Addressing the crowd, Balthasar proclaimed, Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce to you, for the very first time, Lord and Lady Alva Danae. The entire camp erupted into a thunderous cheer. Near the front of the crowd, Glandair drew his sword, held it toward the sky, and shouted, Lord and Lady Danae for Lacinia, which is, was, and ever shall be. Hellel then raised his own sword and shouted, Lord and Lady Danae for Huron, and for all who follow the light. From the stage, Bonson shouted, Lord and Lady Danae for the Twin Kingdoms. Philon shouted, Lord and Lady Danae for His Royal Majesty King Tyagon the True, the hero of Lacinia, wherever he may be. As the crowd continued to cheer, Alva motioned with his hand for Bonson to lean in. Bonson inclined his head forward, and Alva said, Keep the watchmen on guard for a night attack. See that the others get as much rest as possible, but have them in formation before the sun comes up. I'll meet you there. We attack at dawn. Why are we waiting so long? Bonson asked. Ask me again on your wedding day, Alva said with a smile. Yes, master. Alva waved his hand at Bonson as though to shoo away a bee. Then he turned to Nira. Lady Nira, I think you've earned a night off. Yes, Nira replied. I will go enjoy my 9 months of freedom. As the crowd subsided and everyone went their separate ways, Lavender Eyes approached Balthasar. My lord, he said, bowing. No need to bow, my friend, Balthasar replied. I'm not a lord, just a humble civil servant. We of Lassacreston consider every luminary a lord. We thought that Lady Hope was the only one living. As far as I know, she is, Balthasar replied. My lord, you were shining as you spoke. Truly you are a luminary, though perhaps not as powerful as Lady Hope. I think you saw her reflection in my large, sweaty head, the mayor replied with a laugh. Truly, my lord, you yourself were shining, and your words had a power beyond that of normal men. Have you not noticed your words bringing joy to men before now? People always smile and laugh at my high voice and comical intonations. Perhaps more was going on than you knew, Lavender Eyes mused. Do you know your lineage? Are you descended from luminaries? I know my genealogy going back farther than Divan the Great, and there are no luminaries in it. I am descended from the wild donkey of Maverin on my mother's side, but that is my only claim to fame. Lavender Eyes looked deep in thought. Could it be that there were luminaries outside of the ancient bloodlines? Or could there be a mistake in Balsasanor's genealogy? Well, my lord, he said at last, I give you honor and thank you for your speech. Civil servants like you make me think we have been wrong to remain separate from Lassenian society for these many season changes. Lassenia welcomes you back, my friend, Balsasar replied. And since there is no banquet tonight, let's you and I go have a glass of wine. Most of the camp went to bed as quickly as possible and enjoyed a peaceful, restful slumber.